Henshin a go baby, what's good guys? Yoku here and welcome to the School of Silverwolf. Before we begin class, let's address some common misconceptions about our star student here.
Silverwolf is bad because she is complete RNG and will give the enemy a weakness that they naturally have.
Isn't that cute? But it's wrong!
Silverwolf is actually really bad for free-to-play players because there is not a single character in the game that they can use to actually benefit from Silverwolf, actually. Silverwolf was hard nerfed and she is no better than Pela now. In fact, there's no reason to even think about pulling for Silverwolf because Pela exists.
Congratulations! All of those are wrong. Most of these misconceptions are answered with common sense, but there are some that even left me open to testing the theories. Thankfully, the gods of RNG were on my side, and I will be breaking down everything about Silverwolf and what makes her tick the best. Before that, huge shout outs to HoYoverse for sponsoring this video. I have to express my gratitude from the opportunity alone, but if you want to see me testing more of Silverwolf and playing with her throughout the entire day, then you can follow me on twitch.tv/IYOKUU. I could have just given you my, like the lower third is right there, guys. You can see that. And with that out of the way, class is in session. Silverwolf can be wrapped up as one simple thing: the best support character in the game. Hypothetically, that is. But for the sake of the argument, let me back up my explanations. Her basic premise is to absolutely destroy the enemies with a bunch of debuffs, and you'd be surprised just how quickly they stack up on top of each other. This is, of course, due to her talent, awaiting system response, which creates 3 different types of bugs to apply to any one enemy, and those bugs will reduce the attack, defense, or reduce their speed. Did I also mention that she kind of does this regardless of whether or not you do her ultimate skill or basic attack? Let's take Silverwolf's ultimate for instance and say I don't know, let's just say that Silverwolf smashes Kokoyo with her ultimate and applies this huge defense reduction for a couple of turns. That counts as an attack, which means her talent kicks in, and now there's a chance you can stack a second defense reduction on top of Kokoyo. Now the defense reduction I mentioned earlier also has its own stat counter, coincidentally. Now we're at 2 stacks of debuffs for 1 attack so far, but we can go even further beyond. There's this trace Silverwolf gets called Generate, which not only extends the duration of her bugs by 1 turn, but guess what? It also stacks an extra bug on the enemy every single time the enemy is inflicted with a weakness break. And the best part about this is that it's not just from Silverwolf. I literally mean if anybody gets snapped with a weakness break, she smacks a bug implant on them. The beauty of this trace is that it's literally the first trace, the very first trace you're able to unlock. What's even crazier is I haven't even talked about the most vicious of the bugs, which makes me consider her a must pull. In my opinion, for obvious need to say purposes. Don't attack me for this. Silverwolf's skill is known as allow changes, which is the key element to making or breaking whether or not you regard Silverwolf as a high priority to your account. This one skill is easily as close to broken, if not more, than Bronya's own skill, being able to teleport any ally forward to steal turns. Silverwolf's skills quite literally hacks a weakness onto an enemy that didn't exist before, and it's from your own team. This is huge for not only opening up more team comps in Honkai Star Rail so we don't have to keep playing the same thing, but also for the sake of preventing what a lot of you fear the most, power creep. I really don't think most of you understand how detrimental that is to an RPG out of all types of games. So let me break this down in the most simple way possible. Bam! SW slaps a weakness onto the enemy that just ever so coincidentally happens to be the exact same element that your main DPS is. Just for clarity's sake, it's not actually a coincidence. There's a way to force it, but I'll go over that later in the video. For example, if the enemy isn't weak to lightning, but I really want to hit him as hard as possible with my Jingtaro, what Silverwolf's skill allows me to do is smack that enemy with the lightning weakness. Not only that, but it also reduces the damage and all type resistance to that same enemy by 20% for 2 turns. Oh, and don't worry about the 2 turns. I know it seems kind of short, but to be fair, her next unlockable trace is called Inject, and that'll extend the weakness implant duration by 1 turn, totaling out to 3 turns. And realistically speaking, I've been able to just boss wipe things in 3 to 4 turns as it is. Did I mention that this ability also does deals over 100% quantum damage from her own attack as well. Mind you, her multipliers are insane. Like Zila has some of the highest multipliers in the game for what I'm seeing, and Silverwolf's multipliers match Zila's. That's crazy.
Oh, but Yonku, it's completely random and not by choice.
It's actually not completely random unless you are just really bad at team building, which in that case, I'll just teach you guys exactly how to do that in the team building section. As of right now, though, there is a huge misconception about Silverwolf's skill that you cannot control her skill's application. This isn't inherently true, but you also can't literally choose to do the thing. If I want to apply the lightning weakness, I can't choose to give it a lightning weakness. However, there are different ways to manipulate what I'm going to get out of Silverwolf's skill. Her skill is literally the creme de la creme of a debuffing character. Honestly, everything about her kit screams total domination. There is not a single enemy in the game she cannot help you overcome. You were stuck in Forgotten Hall because your second DPS wasn't the right element. Yo, no worries, bro. Silverwolf is just gonna implant the weakness onto the enemy. Oh, you saved all your jades for Mommy Dami Kafka and you want to use her everywhere because that's what I would do, and I'm gonna do that whenever she comes out. Totally cool too, right? Silverwolf is gonna make sure that all your enemies are officially weak to lightning forever. However, all of that said, there is still one major thing that needs to be understood about not just Silverwolf, but the game itself. A lot of these effects have the term base chance written behind them. And while the base chance is high, it still doesn't mean it's 100% guaranteed to happen no matter what. That's because some of the higher level enemies, typically bosses, have what's known as effect resistance, and that requires a formula, which goes into a bunch of math and calculations. And to be frank, I don't really want to have to do a math course in this video because I hate math. That's why I went ahead and broke everything down for you with the help of my friend Goba, Moon, and Edison. They helped build a calculator specifically for me to be able to determine exactly how much effect hit rate would be needed to overcome the resistance of most enemies, and they helped me crunch numbers.
Interesting. Let's see.
Before I start, let's do a quick breakdown of all the numbers on the graph. Orange means don't touch, blue means we can touch it. Base effect percent is whatever your skill or whatever you're trying to do has a base effect percent of. So in this case, Silverwolf is going to have about 75%. For most of the bosses in the game, they're going to have an effect resistance of about 50%. Debuff resistance is going to come into effect later, but that's essentially debuffing and taking away the effect resistance they already have. This is going to show you your overall chance to hit per hit, and then as you can see beneath that, you start to fill in the rest of the blanks: light cones, traces and buffs, your actual chest piece, whether or not you have that, the 2-piece set. How many sub amounts is going to be how many rolls that you rolled into the substats for effect hit rate. Got it? Good. Golden. Let's do it. Assuming my base skill is level 1 and I have 75% of a base chance to hit, then roughly speaking, I'm going to need about 87% effect hit rate in order to hit 70% of the time against enemies who have a 50% effect resistance. I'm also showing you that you only need one substat in EHR with 0 traces, and that's typically not how this is going to work. So this is really low. 70% is really good. We can go up from here. But to show you the complete extreme to that, if I really wanted 100% and I was at level 1 and I didn't want to do anything else, I'm going to need at least 166% of my effect hit rate, max traces, max effect hit rate pieces, max substat rolls, all that kind of stuff, and the maxed out light cone. Now that is way too much at level 1. So we need to level up the skill. If I take the skill to level 7, now I have, roughly speaking, about an 81% base chance in order to hit, which significantly lowers the rest of my numbers. As you can see here, with just the light cone and nothing else besides substat rolls, all I would need is 75% in order to get a 70% chance to hit every enemy in the game. But if I wanted 100%, now I can fill in the rest of the stuff, being that my traces and buffs are most likely going to be somewhere between 10 to 18%. I'm going to have the gold chest piece. I'm going to have some substat rolls. And in total, I would need about 147% effect hit rate to guarantee hit everything in the game. Now, I know that seems like a lot, but I promise you, once you actually look in your game and you see how many effect hit rate pieces you have and how many substat rolls you get into, that number significantly decreases. Naturally, Silverwolf is already gonna have minimum 80% thanks to the light cone and the chest. She's going to give herself another 18% if you max out her traces, which puts you almost at 100%, which means the rest of that comes from your substats, which at that point is no harder than grinding for crit rate and crit damage ratios. In fact, it might actually be easier. Woo! I know that was a lot to take in, but this is the type of character that you really need to understand a lot about the game's mechanics, her own traits, and what you can or can't do in order to manipulate those towards your favor. Finally, with the more complicated stuff out of the way, I can move on to the easy stuff. Relics. Genius of Brilliant Stars will be her only option at the time of this video's creation. Not only will this increase her quantum damage, but since everything she does deals damage, she will almost always fight something with a quantum weakness thanks to her skill. There is a 99% chance she will strike for an additional 20% reduction on defenses to every single enemy in the entire game. There is almost no reason not to use this particular relic set. Now, while Musketeer can be used, it's honestly a situational set at best to help achieve a little more speed. However, due to Silverwolf's naturally decent speed stat, one pair of golden speed boots plus exactly one more speed stat will net the desired 134 speed. This is going to allow her to move twice in one turn in between cycles. So increasing her speed higher than that isn't bad, but it didn't prove to give me any better reward during my testing, simply because it meant I needed to take away from the available effect hit rate or break effect substats just for speed. And speaking of which, those are the most important stats you're looking for. Effect hit rate is the most important, seeing as how you'll want to get as close to 100% as possible. Speed isn't exactly a priority since the boost, once again, will give you all you need, which lets us focus on the next best thing. Break effect. The reason for this is because Silverwolf will want to do a lot of breaking, not only due to her trace applying an additional bug, but because the quantum element has a special break property that's basically a cheat code. It's called entanglement, and it delays the enemy by a set amount based on your actual break effect. It doesn't work like a normal damage over time though, which we'll be referring to damage over time as DOT for short. So instead of DOT, it actually does damage by bullying. For every attack the entangled enemy receives, that ends up getting added into one big boom once the enemy takes their turn. Now, there are some instances where you could try for an attack percent body piece if you have the EHR covered in substats somewhere else, but from what I was able to test, most of her utility will come from applying bugs and popping breaks on the enemy. That's where I saw a lot of her big boy damage. I mean, Silverwolf is a girl, so I guess I'm supposed to say big girl damage. Lastly, we'll go over the planar ornaments. Pangalactic and Fleet of the Ageless will be her best ornaments in slot. Pangalactic is going to give you an extra 10% effect hit rate, and on top of that will increase Silverwolf's attack by an amount that's equal to 25% of her effect hit rate. In simple terms, this basically means that the more EHR she has, the closer she gets to having a max attack increase. During my own test, I did not find more value out of using Fleet versus Pangalactic, simply because she didn't really value giving more of the attack percent, being that it was only 8%, to the rest of the team, compared to her reducing so many of the defenses on top of what was going on. And being able to use Pangalactic, that effect hit rate really did help out. The only reason I don't have Kingdom of Banditry as one of her best in slots is because the second half of the relic requires a speed stat of 145, but it gives you an extra 26% break effect on top of whatever else you already have, which is a huge plus going towards what I mentioned earlier. As far as the specific pieces, Quantum is definitely your go-to orb, but for the link rope, you can make a decision between energy regen and break effect, or break effect. That's the way that, you know, I know English, grammar works that way. This ultimately just depends on what you want to do. Break effect is going to help you obviously do the breaking, and energy regen will help you get your ultimate that much faster. However, there's another way to get energy regen without the link rope, and it's free. Light cones, light cones, light cones, light cones. The things that I love and I value oh so highly, while everyone else seems to think light cones don't matter. I'm happy to say Silverwolf's best light cone is actually free. Yes, you heard it here, folks. The light cone that you need for Silverwolf, if you happen to pull her, is free. The name of the light cone is before the tutorial mission starts. It's given to you once again for free at the start of the brand new event that is live right now. And throughout the event, you will be able to 100% max superimpose this light cone for a free 40% effect hit rate. Not only that, but it goes into what I mentioned earlier about the energy regeneration. It also gives you 8% extra energy regen, not when she destroys an enemy, every time she attacks a defense reduced enemy, which, as we also went over, happens a lot more often than you think. She basically recycles energy for every free action, and if you manage to couple this with an energy regen rope, then you might actually find yourself getting your ultimate back in just a couple of attacks. There wasn't really a point where I didn't have ultimate when I was using Silverwolf, and I really needed to use ultimate. And speaking of the 5-star, let's go over Incessant Rain. This light cone is absolutely amazing. I don't want anyone to think that, like, if you happen to pull this, because you guys know I love 5-star light cones, that this would be a bad light cone. It is by no means bad at all. It's wonderful. It's amazing. There's so many things that the light cone does. The ether code actually being another bug in itself, but I do believe there is more value up front in focusing on her event light cone, because it's completely free and it will put your Silverwolf on the board immediately. And being able to superimpose that light cone for free to get the extra 40% EHR is huge in comparison to being at S1 and only having the 24%. Some other options do exist for Silverwolf to be able to use other light cones like Sampos, but honestly, there's almost no point in covering them since her best option is, once again for the final time, completely free. Yes, everybody can get this light cone. It's completely free. There's no reason for any Silverwolf haver to not have this light cone.
Easier than I thought.
After everything has been fully explained in order to understand Silverwolf herself and what's recommended to focus on building, we can finally go over where and how Silverwolf will shine in most teams. This particular section is controversial, maybe. I've tested every single possible idea of a comp in my head, and only 2 teams stood out to me as her best team compositions. But before going into them, let me break down why some of the others didn't exceed my expectations. The first one being the multi-elemental team. This is the one that's going to consist of 4 different elements altogether, particularly for free-to-play versions. This team was able to perform just okay in my opinion. The team itself wasn't the problem. I was able to clear floors and Memory of Chaos just fine. However, it took a lot of smart playing. You cannot bring this character onto a team against an enemy without paying attention to how you're attacking the boss. Ergo, if the enemy is weak to fire, ice, and lightning, and you bring a team of Natasha, Fire MC, Dawn Hung, and Silverwolf, then you're always going to be rolling the dice on whose element gets implanted. The bugs are awesome, but not if Natasha's element is constantly being implanted. The next comp is something I've noticed a lot of players try to force onto everything, which is hyper carry. This would be something like Bailu, Bronya, Silverwolf, and whatever DPS you want. Let's take Himiko for instance, because I like Himiko. Initially, while I tested this team, it didn't work as intended. It was physically impossible for me to constantly shoot for using Bronya's redeployment skill, implanting the fire weakness with Silverwolf, and also using Himiko's skill each turn. The only way this worked for me was by giving Bailu the Passerby of Wandering Cloud relic set for the extra skill point at the beginning of the turn, and that only helped me in the beginning of the turn. I still needed to limit myself to choose between using Bronya's redeployment or Silverwolf skill every other turn. In the event I needed to heal, I would either be screwed or forced to heal the team instead and not be able to use anybody else's skill. What often ended up happening was I would sacrifice one turn of not using Bronya in order to use Bronya's skill in the following turn. But the worst part about this is when I swapped Himiko to Zila or Jing. At that point, it was physically impossible for me to keep up with the SP consumption without suffering some kind of major drawback. After that, I tested the idea of a completely mono quantum team. While I'm not able to accurately test this with a 4th quantum unit, I was able to mock this by using the only 3 available quantum units in the game. In the future, I'm sure this will be more viable since we'll have a 4th quantum unit, but as of right now, this team is already skill point hungry because of Xing Shui and Zila specifically. Now, admittedly, I did clear Memory of Chaos floor 3 in about 6 turns total, and then Xing Shui died in the first battle. Take that information and do with it what you will. So with all of that said, what are the best team comps that I found myself having 100% success with? The answer to that is the fake mono comp and a dual element comp. These names obviously aren't real comp names. I genuinely don't know what to call them, so I'm just gonna explain it. Fake mono comp consists of 3 of the same element plus Silverwolf. This was most useful against enemies that are already weak to quantum because it forced Silverwolf to only choose the element that the rest of the team was a part of. Using lightning and especially Jingtaro, everything was great, but since it's only single target with Silverwolf's skill, I ended up relying way too much on Lightning Lord, having to clear out the entire row of enemies. It was this weird slow hyper carry setting that wasn't really a hyper carry, but it functioned like one. Where this team best perform though is when the smaller mobs or secondary bosses were already weak to my main DPS element, in this case being lightning. But the main boss was the one that was weak to quantum. What that did was force Silverwolf to apply the weakness to the boss and only focus on the boss, while the erudition characters were able to sweep through the entire mobs in the game and still deal damage to the boss. Last, and my personal favorite, is the double DPS comp. The team that I preferred using was Bailu, Serval, Silverwolf, and Zila. Bailu is pretty obvious here, but I chose her actually because of Serval. Serval has had a lot of popularity popularity lately in regards to a break build, and that's what I'm using her to help out with here. She covers the AoE side of damage where my Zila and Silverwolf do not, and there's a specific reason for this that I'll get into shortly, but any Erudition character can work here. Zila was my go-to choice because she is the strongest quantum DPS unit in the game, and with how many debuffs Silverwolf is already stacking onto one enemy, I really wanted to take full advantage of boss wiping as quickly as possible. Now, some of you might be asking yourself, why and how does a dual element team work, and how is it anywhere near good? Wouldn't that leave Silverwolf playing a guessing game on whose element to apply? What I was able to do with this team was always force the scenario so that either quantum or lightning would be applied and nothing else. The trick here is that most of the enemies that I'm facing off against are weak to some combination of elements plus lightning or elements plus quantum. That means I can immediately eliminate one DPS option that Silverwolf would be choosing, which results in my entire team being able to fully break down the toughness meter without any worries. Because of that, I'm also able to take even more advantage of both entanglement and the shock states, along with healing myself thanks to Bailu in the event I actually needed to and still not running out of skill points. Out of all the testing I did, this team had a 100% uptime record of absolutely destroying Memory of Chaos floors in about 2 to 4 turns tops. I truly believe this type of team comp is where Silverwolf is going to see the most shine.
Warm-ups over.
That's it. I think I've covered everything. Oh, wait, no. Eidolons. It's only fair that I give my opinions on whether the Eidolons are actually worth breaking the bank, and as much as I love her, and also on the fact that I can make some damn good arguments as to why these Eidolons are legendary, at the end of the day, this decision ultimately comes down to your own desires. Do not do anything that I wouldn't do, especially if you are not in a financially stable enough position to be asking this question. That said, her E1 is surprisingly really useful for saving the cost in energy regeneration. It regenerates 7 energy for every debuff the enemy has when using her ultimate, and using what I taught you guys earlier, stacking 5 debuffs on the enemy before or even during the ultimate means you're basically regenerating a skill's worth of energy every single ult. Now you pair that with the light cone that I talked about earlier, which is the 4-star free event one, and you're pretty much doing exactly what I mentioned, where you're getting your ultimate back every 2 to 3 turns, give or take 1 or 2 energy. E2, however, is, my god, bro, E2 is an actual game changer. I need you guys to understand this when I say it. It is so good. It is so good that I'm fighting my own urges to pull for an E2 Silverwolf because it implies so much more than you think. This Eidolon itself might get looked over by a lot of players because it doesn't buff Silverwolf directly at all, but in actuality, it should be better. This reduces the effect resistance of every single enemy. Every single one that enters the battle by 20% automatically. There is not a single thing in the game that can stop this from happening, which means all the formulas and math that I showed you earlier and the requirements to hit 100% skill shots are now vastly reduced. To put this into perspective, you need roughly about 166% effect hit rate with max substat rolls, a gold EHR body piece, the superimposed light cone, and max traces with a level 1 skill at E0 in order to net 100% chance to hit everything with the highest resistance in the game. At E2, with the lowest possible values of 1 EHR substat for 4 pieces total, you are naturally over 100% overall chance to hit everything resisted in the game. Again, that's the lowest possible values. So imagine what a level 7 talent plus gold bodied EHR build Silverwolf would do. Then her E4 deals an additional 20% of her attack for every debuff on the enemy after using her ultimate, which is going to stack 5 times, which goes into the other things that I mentioned, which also stack 5 times. On top of all of that, E6 straight up increases her damage to 100% if you have those 5 stacks of debuffs on the enemy. So you're just, bro, I've seen a lot of crazy stuff happen with getting multiple copies of characters, but I've never seen one of them straight up become a literal goddess. Silverwolf is so dedicated to the gamer lifestyle that she broke the 4th wall and hacked her own game. If I were a betting man and I really wanted to ensure that my account could never ever get outdated or power crept, I would 107% snipe an E2 Silverwolf now and stress less about every other decision afterwards. All of these Eidolons are crazy, but E2 is absolutely my recommending stopping point without a sheer amount of luck or some rich lady's purse. At the end of the game, Silverwolf has honestly shown me she is worthy of being considered a final boss character turned playable. All this testing, all the playing, everything that I was able to do, I fell in love with the character that I already had high hopes for, but this completely blew me away. She makes strong accounts even stronger, free-to-play accounts less stressful, and she makes me feel like the coolest cheater in the game. Silverwolf has honestly earned a ranking from me of a 10 out of 10. And with that, class is over. I hope you guys enjoyed this video of me going over Silverwolf and this, and I don't know, bro, this complete breakdown of the character, this full-on guide, if you will. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down in the comment section below. I will do my best to answer anything a little bit more specifically. I went over as much detail as possible that I could in this video, but I didn't want to give you guys too much because there's already so much about the character that you need to understand. So a lot more of this will be put out into other videos. If you want to see more of my Silverwolf tech or what I'm doing with Silverwolf and what I recommend, join my Discord. It's a link down below and in the pinned comment section. Follow me on Twitch because we're trying to get partnered status on Twitch so I can be a cool kid and get more free stuff. And subscribe because I want to hit 10K. I love you all. Platonically, of course. I can't say my user outro because it's inappropriate for YouTube. Smell you later.